Hi everyone, this is Ryan and welcome back to Sentinels of the Future. If you've seen some of the previous videos, you should realize by now that we have some incredible things happening here while the angels communicate with us using divine lessons in prophecy. Some of you already know I was the guardian of the 3 budgies that communicated in sophisticated conversational language, and they are the source of these amazing videos and audio communications. If you are new, you're going to hear some things that are a little bit hard to believe. However, we provide solid evidence that these budgies are communicating in full-blown speech in both forward and reverse. Even more important is they testify in their own words about how they are connected to God and communicate through the angels. You'll be able to witness these communications yourself during each presentation. They call themselves the Sentinels of the Future. And this is the first time in history that not only budgies are communicating to humanity in sophisticated conversational language, but they are also channeling messages from God and His angels. In these series of presentations, you'll be experiencing living prophecy to an extent the world has never seen or heard before. You'll be able to witness incredible hidden messages and miraculous communication. The truth is, this can only be classified as one of the most important biblical events in history. God and His angels are communicating here, and there is a multitude of things that they want to pass on to humanity for guiding us on a path to a better future. In the past 20 years or so, I've headed up many forums and websites, some of which were quite successful. Due to the complexity of what was happening and the controversial content, many of the people involved created issues which resulted in most of my forums basically being shut down. In 2017, something different happened. God and His angels have promised to give us a plan so this does not happen again. They are providing us with ways to reverse the evil of the many people, for one reason or the other, who are trying to suppress this from humanity. Over the years, I have prayed a lot and asked God to give me the answers so I can get more people involved and continue where I left off. My answers came in this video, and Victor made it in 2001, which predicted all this to happen. In it, he explains how we are going to resolve the issues that happened in the past and start new. If you saw the Superconscious Bird Part 1, the angels talked about God's new system and plan. This video continues from there and was shot in the same day as Part 1, just later on in the day. So before we hear the video, I'm going to brief you on what he is talking about in the first 4 parts. Please keep in mind that I often will say Victor says these things, but in reality, much of what he says comes from the angels and even God, who is channeling through him and the people in the videos. This is done in this miraculous way so others can witness and hear this wondrous event as well. He talks about how in the future there will be many coming with their questions with the new system. In 2017, I was prompted by the angels to start a new system by using forward-reverse speech to show how miraculous these communications really are. I will be doing at least 70 of these presentations over the next couple of years. When Victor speaks about new visionaries, he refers to what we call the people who were and will get involved in the early stages of this project. As they come, they will play an important role in the future of a new religion from God for humanity that will see extraordinary events during its development. It will have a continuous channel which will be open to God and His angels throughout the entire process. Victor also mentions that timing is important. I believe he means that people, more than ever, are opening up to spirituality and the spiritual nature of God, where they may not have been ready for something like this 10 or 20 years ago. In Part 2, when he talks about resolving an easy way for the visionaries to function, he is setting up the content of what he is about to teach in this video. He also mentions quantum reverse and how the angels have been providing me with theories on how this entire miracle is taking place. In part 4, he talks about how many will be interested in learning this, and he also predicts the issues we have had over the years, well after he had transcended to the spiritual world in 2001. So this is another video of his that is full of living prophecy and prophetic messages. So in part 1 he says, in forward, we'll have many who will be coming with their questions. In reverse he says, with the new system. And in part 2 he says, in forward, he's got many lessons right here. So Ryan actually proves the point. Don't you think that's nice to hear? In reverse he says, we resolve an easy way to function with the visionaries here, telling it all. In part 3 and forward he says, granted, timing is also a key cause of a report to have a place. They're not only for, in reverse he says, proving of Ryan's theories that we are providing in quantum reverse. And in part 4 he says, there's no question Ryan's got something that others will try and get. What's often, and then in reverse he says, adversary might purposely question him on the mission. Now you can hear parts 1 to 4.
Look this way, Victor.
Over the last year or so, I realized how much help I really need to get this mission in full swing, especially when it comes to establishing a forum that people will come to. I used to have the time to get involved in posting regularly to the forums I manage, but now I'm spending more time doing the transcriptions. In addition, things have changed much in the last 10 years, and it is more difficult for me to get the people to come out and participate these days. So I know I have to more or less partner with someone who already has an existing forum with lots of people in it who are interested in spirituality to help me get it going. They would have to be willing to leave some of their own belief systems out of it until they get a good idea of what God really wants us to know. The plentiful lessons that God has provided me are coming from all 3 of my budgies, and they are methodically placed in time, so the teaching process will run in a miraculous and smooth fashion. The only thing missing at this point is the participation. My vision, and hopefully God's as well, is to first get things started with about 10 or 20 visionaries who are really interested, and let them witness and participate in the miracles themselves. Once they begin to learn and believe, I can let them be the ones to help pass on what they know in the forum. I would more or less only have to step in when needed and provide lessons as God has laid them out for me. In continuing with the video, in part 5 to 8, Victor talks about those who cause problems, and when some are given warnings, how they will often act as victims, so others will side with them. He also talks about the challenges that some will bring to the forum because of religious evil. He speaks specifically to someone who believes it is only an act, and Victor says that if he only came to act, then at least it would be nice to have an admission from that person that his videos are precious. He also talks about how his recordings are much different than other videos you might see on the internet of budgies repeating what their guardians say. Lastly, he talks about how some will come and try to affect every aspect of what the angels are trying to teach us, and when that happens, we should deal with it accordingly. So in this one, Victor says, in forward in part 5, They might keep on trying after a time as a victim. In reverse, he says, usually they have challenges from their religion. In part 6 and forward, he says, at first she thought this talking might be an act. My dear, if I came to only act here, and then in reverse he says, we might get you to agree that Ryan has raised an admission. In part 7 and forward he says, I'm still heard in this precious film. In reverse he says, that's the truth. So he now has to, and then in part 8 he says in forward, in this study, show this is much different. If a guest is here looking to hassle, and then in reverse he says, all the rest who want it, they shall try to affect everything, and will mention it. So now you can hear parts 5 to 8. In a previous part of the last video, Victor talked about God's food in the form of knowledge and how we will need it in the future. In this part, he continues that train of thought with the things he has planted and grown, and talks about how people will be called here by God to learn when the time is right. He tries to explain that you may wonder why we are worried about the challengers and troublemakers, and says that you can never defeat them unless you have a plan to stop them. And he calls the disruption the kitty cat who meows. So he's beginning to set up the rules and regulations for God's forum by letting us know that those who are escorted by evil will need to be moderated before they reach the forum, and we'll have to point them out. In part 12, he answers the questions. How will others know if these people who may cause problems are truthful or not? He says that we will be able to tell by the questions they ask, and those questions or remarks will provide the rest with facts that we base our warnings, or eventually ask people to leave if they are not here to learn. So in part 9 to 12 he says, in part 9 and forward, some will ask to eat what I've grown. Here, earth calls someone who gets to learn. In reverse he says, I know right now why you are here. How can you defeat the challenges? And then part 10 and forward he says, that don't rest here unless the kitty cat meows each time he talks. And then in reverse he says, some people need moderation before they reach the forum. And then in part 11 and forward he says, when people are escorted by evil, we'll point them out. And in reverse he says, how will you know? How we will know who's truthful. And then in part 12 and forward he says, when all questions are known, most will feel, and then in reverse he says, the facts are known enough. Now you can hear parts 9 to 12. In the next parts, he continues to talk about how people will think in the forum, saying that some will support and welcome it when we have to deal with the troublemakers in the forum, and others who are helping will have knowledge when they help. He says, if there are people in the forum who just won't believe it, then they should basically not be part of it, and if they are given early warnings, they should be ignored until they have a change of heart. He also says that most of the people will know who is there to cause issues, and they'll be able to tell by the amount of effort one puts into understanding what's happening. So that probably means please do not jump to conclusions about how we deal with issues in the forum until you are knowledgeable about all of the facts that lead up to the warning or removal from the group. In part 12, he asks the question, is it okay to talk about parrots? In previous forums, I felt bad when I had to tell people who were interested only in parrot intelligence and not in the spiritual aspect of what was happening to limit their discussions about parrot intelligence. Otherwise, it turned into nothing but conversation about parrots, and those who were there to learn what God really wanted to teach us were not learning at the rate they could have been. That goes for many things, especially when it comes to comparing what is happening here to one's New Wave beliefs. The problem comes if we open it up to all the belief systems out there. It often turns into a discussion on one that can last for days, when it could be resolved very quickly in a future lesson with direct input from God and His angels. So he asks for a little bit of discretion in certain areas. But there is also a reason we have to get on with the more important stuff God wants us to learn. So he starts off in reverse from the previous paragraph saying, in part 12, some shall wholly, and then in part 13 and forward, support it and will welcome it. In reverse he says, some will have knowledge and help. In part 14 and forward he says, I never believed anyway to not be something to think about. You've got to believe the reason. In reverse he says, I see some people who get early warnings and the people viewing just ignore them. In part 16 and forward he says, because we can make a better place and develop it. In reverse he says, make an effort and you'll know who's spewing insults. In part 17 and forward he says, is it okay in here to discuss parrots? It will depend. In reverse he says, there will be some discretion, but there's a reason to get on with the, in part 18 in forward mode he says, important stuff learned. So now you can hear part 13 to 17. In part 18 to 20, he continues on with solving issues in the forum. I'm sure that he says these things much more elegantly than me, so I hope I don't offend anyone. He talks about taking what you've learned so far and protecting it by not letting others try and fog the facts or open up a culture that does not necessarily agree with what God is trying to teach us. That is truly an area which has caused many problems in the past, and you would be surprised who would do it when it happens. In this part, I'd like to thank God and the angels for trusting me and saying such nice things about me. I often wonder where and when I could have done something better. There have been many times that I've had disagreements with friends in one of the forums, and I've had to ask them to leave, then later rethinking it and giving them another chance, only later to find out that they do the exact same thing all over again. I've never held anything against the people that have caused me issues in the past, but I am wary now, knowing that some cannot change no matter how much they learn. So in part 18 he says in forward, we think you should take what you've learned and protect it. In reverse he says, to intercept evil infiltrating as a stream. In part 19 and forward he says, of lies that open a culture. We cross that, and in reverse he says, all the time when a rival decides, and in part 20 and forward he says, to question what's actually done without cause. God sees how, and then in reverse he says, and accepts how Ryan runs the mission here. And then in part 21 forward he says, and you can trust Victor picked him. In reverse he says, for his nature is so forgiving. That was actually part 18 to 21. So now you can listen to it. In this next part, Victor talks about some of the reasons I've had periods of confusion and discouragement in the past. It has been difficult over the years, but well worth any issues I've had as a result of doing this. I know whenever something like this is disclosed, some people are going to have a hard time believing it. I often felt like the sad soldier myself, for there were times that the angels wanted me to correct someone for inadvertently taking us in the wrong direction. I often struggled with telling people what the angels wanted me to say because I did not want to hurt any feelings. I believe that some of the things that the angels told me to say were to people they knew would cause issues in the future, so they decided to deal with it before it became a problem. I had so many letdowns and often got discouraged when people I thought were there to help ended up causing more issues instead. There were points that I had long periods of soul searching, and things were brought to a halt because of it. So for a while, it was very difficult to put my full trust in people who were really there to help. So in part 22 to 25 he says, in the forward mode, he's been attacked and cursed at with some that are coming. In reverse he says, even when with him they're shown prophecy. And in part 23 he says, and forward, they casted discontent with every step we've had yet. In reverse, in heaven. We've seen them try to insult him. And then in part 24 and forward he says, when you just attack someone, you're a sad soldier. And then part 25 and forward he says, he's got a cause to worry given what we want. And now you can hear parts 22 to part 25.
Tell me a joke, Victor.
So in the last part he said, I have a cause to worry given what we want. He must have meant what the angels want. It's not easy to start a religion that's based on budgie speech. However, everything that I've been told by God and the angels in the past puts this religion on the highest level of importance for the future. There is so much that it will be able to help humanity with, and we will only have touched the surface. It is definitely a heavy weight on my shoulders, and there are times that I doubt myself or even question myself if I want the job. It is a good thing that I have Linda and our daughter Kayla in my life to help me get through the rough parts and give me encouragement too. Most of my family think I'm crazy, and many of the new people that Linda and I meet back away from this when we tell them about it. We don't do it for money, and I work a full-time job while spending an additional 40 hours a week working on this project. However, I'm not complaining, because this does give me comfort and peace of mind in my life. It is a wonderful journey that I do over and over again, knowing in advance that some of what I'm doing will affect the future in a positive way. I'm hoping others will come soon with the same goal in mind. So in part 25, in forward mode, Victor says, he's got a cause to worry given what we want. And then in reverse he says, If Ryan was having erosion in life for supporting this, and then part 26 he says in forward, what would you tell him? This whole story is going to get better. And then in reverse he says, as we endure with reversals of evil. And then I say, we have prophecy. And then in part 27 and forward, he says, Ryan's about to bring a different future. And in reverse, he says, many of you have this option. And then I say, right here for yourself. So now you can hear part 25 to part 27.
Have you got a joke for Ryan? Yeah, what did I give you? Tell us your fart joke.
The last part of this video is very interesting, especially when Victor says the future may exist in this channel to heaven. I do not think he means that without it the future will not exist. He means that the angels are communicating from the future. He says it was the future that caused him to talk as well. When you listen to the lessons, it is true that you will find something living in every lesson. Later on, some of them will be in real-time communications with the angels, and usually in the lesson there'll be something that stands out and relevant to what's happening at the time it is published. For example, someone may have a question they ask God, and the answer will come with the next video. In his final statement, he talks about how we will repeat the miracle when the new visionaries come. That miracle will be an answer to a question in the form given to me prior to the question being asked, or you'll be told of a future event just prior to it happening in the news. We call these confirmations, and they provide proof that God and his angels know what's going to happen in the future. These prophecies can help us accept God's direction when he begins to provide us with solutions and a plan that will help prevent pain and suffering in the future. So in part 28 he says, it's like the future may exist, and then in reverse he says, in this channel to heaven. In part 29 he says, in forward, with the future it caused Victor to talk. And then in reverse he says, I assure you there's something living in every lesson. And then I say, to show what is possible. And then in part 30 and forward he says, of course, I may concede that something might come someday. Ryan is going to reduce the talk, and then in reverse, as all new visionaries are shown how he repeats the miracle. So now you can hear the final part of this video.
What'd you say? Put the what? Hell with the piss.